Welcome to the Dave Knows Wrestling 2021 Awards. Now, in 2020, I took it upon myself to come up with the nominees and the winners. However, this year, I'm leaving that up to you. I've taken to the live streams and to social media to get a list of the nominees for the very best and the worst of this past year. Who are these nominees? Well, they're the topic of this episode, because today, alright, so this year I decided to hand the awards back over to you, the people. And with that being said, after this video goes live, I will be posting several polls that you get a chance to vote on, that way you can help decide the winners. Oh, and also while I'm at it, please allow me to remind you to make sure that you're subscribed to this channel and that your notifications are working. And with all that being said, why don't we just get into the nominees? Alright, first up, we have the worst segment or promo of the year, and sadly, there were a lot to choose from, such as the horrible Indy Hartwell and Dexter Lumis wedding. Now, personally, I can't stand weddings, and this just showed how badly NXT has fallen. Furthermore, there was also the really awkward belt exchange between Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch. Oh, and let's not forget about Xavier Woods and his dripstick that he used on The Miz and Morrison. But as bad as those are, let's get into the official nominees. WWE devolving to toilet humor really just shows you how bad this version of NXT is. And when we see Ikemanjiro overeating and then running to the toilet, I don't understand how this is supposed to possibly get him over. If it were up to me, this is easily the worst segment of 2021. Next, of course, how could we forget about Vince McMahon's alleged $100 million egg? Now, one thing that I think 2021 has made clear is that movie tie-ins are absolutely terrible for WWE. And lastly, as much as I don't want to throw Alexa Bliss under the bus, I have to say when I see a doll winking at the camera, well, it just reminds me of how much I miss all of her old gimmicks. Choosing which is the worst is definitely not going to be an easy task, but nevertheless, it's a task that I give to you. On the reverse side of that, we have the best promo or segment of the year. And fortunately, there were also a lot to choose from for this as well. We could go with the promo that Roman Reigns cut on John Cena. We could even talk about when the Briscoes called out FTR, and let's also not forget about LA Knight and his War Games promo. But if we're gonna bring things down to the very best of this year, well, these three seem to be a cut above the rest. Eddie Kingston did what many people thought was impossible, and that's getting the AEW audience to boo CM Punk. But speaking of which, when CM Punk finally came back to professional wrestling, fans everywhere couldn't help but rejoice, and this return was absolutely perfect in every way. 10 years after his pipe bomb promo, he delivered another one, but this time it was for All Elite Wrestling. And finally, the best segment of the year definitely goes to CM Punk in some capacity, because how could we not include CM Punk and MJF's amazing 18-minute segment? This was the verbal jousting that the world was waiting for, and it completely delivered. It was everything I was expecting and so much more. Which of these segments is going to win the award? Well, why don't you go ahead and vote for your favorite. Oh, but by the way, if there's something that you really like for any of these categories that you don't see, well, please let me know down in the comments, and if it gains enough traction, I might consider putting it up for a vote. Anyway, with that being said, let's move on to the next category. Next up, we have the most disappointing match of the year. Now, this isn't to be confused with the worst match of the year. We're gonna get to that later on. Instead, this is the match that disappointed you the most. You might have even liked most of it, except for one small tiny part that ruined the whole thing, or maybe this is a match that just didn't live up to the hype. Like the Queen's Crown match, we had been waiting forever to get a queen in the ring, and when we finally got one, it really wasn't all that special. Or how about when we finally got the return of The Fiend at WrestleMania to get his revenge on Randy Orton, only to wind up losing. But as much of a letdown as these matches were, here are the official nominees. At long last, we finally got the return of the Demon Finn Balor, only to watch him lose the match thanks to a turnbuckle malfunction. Then, many of us have been waiting for the return of a true War Games match, but when we put our faith in AEW, sure, they did get a roof on the cage, but they also gave us a crash pad and a bunch of talking. And of course, if we're gonna talk about disappointing matches, we just have to bring up Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley. This match started off pretty good, but unfortunately, it didn't end with a bang, but instead, it ended with a whimper. Oh, and I just want to point out that I had tickets to see Blood and Guts when it was originally meant to air, but after all the delays, I wound up not getting to see that show. So I just want to point out that on a personal level, that match is just slightly more disappointing than most. Alright, now to a much brighter note, we have the most pleasantly surprising matches of the year. It feels like we were waiting forever for Hook to finally debut in an AEW ring, with many of us thinking that he just couldn't perform to the level that they needed him to. However, once he did finally have a match, he shocked the entire world by being so much better than any of us could have possibly anticipated. Another brilliant surprise came from Christian Cage and Kenny Omega. With WWE lavishing so much attention on Christian's buddy Edge, it seemed like a lot of people forgot about Captain Charisma. However, just like he did when he went to TNA, Christian proved that he is definitely the better wrestler out of Edge and Christian. Not only that, but he also proved it doesn't matter how old he gets, you never can sleep on him. And plus, we also have Matt Cardona and Nick Gage. First, this surprised a lot of fans because we thought that it was Jon Moxley who showed up at Game Changer Wrestling, only to find out that it was the former Zack Ryder instead. But then, we saw a completely different side of him, as not only did he turn heel, but he also had a really bloody affair. And all this culminated with watching Matt Cardona finally win a world title. Now, what I love about all three of these matches is that they're all very different from each other, and they're pleasantly surprising for very different reasons. And when it comes to which one is the most surprising, well, that's going to come down to each of our individual tastes, so I'm really excited about seeing which match is going to come out on top. Alright, and now we have the worst wrestler of the year. Let's just go over the usual suspects. Which one of these wrestlers is your least favorite? Well, mine is Goldberg, but don't let that sway your vote. Or do, I won't complain if it does. And now we have the best wrestler of the year. To be fair, 2021 has been all over the place. However, there have been a select group of wrestlers that have managed to excel in the past 365 days. Quite a few of them, in fact. Now, a fair argument could be made for the current WWE champion, Big E, as not only did he get to win Money in the Bank, but he also cashed it in successfully to win the championship. And of course, you could also say that it's CM Punk's year after his triumphant return to the business. And of course, you could also say that 2021 belongs to Britt Baker, as she's done a lot to improve AEW's women's division. But as good as all those wrestlers did, the official list of nominees are as follows. What can I say? There are a lot of people out there who just can't get enough of the Tribal Chief gimmick. And not only that, but Roman Reigns has been the WWE Universal Champion for the entire calendar year thus far. And many will claim that the Bloodline storyline is the best thing going in all of WWE. But then let's not forget about Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson, as he did not only main event WrestleMania with Roman Reigns, but he has also made one of the best debuts in AEW, as well as dramatically improving the wrestling scene for that company. But as much life as Daniel Bryan added, let's not forget about the guy who was already there, Kenny Omega, as 2021 saw him dominate as the belt collector for most of the year. And not only that, but he's also put on multiple great matches during that time. So, which wrestler is the best of 2021? Well, make sure you vote for him so just one more thing goes good for him this year. And now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, as we have the worst match of the year, and there were definitely a lot to choose from. We could go with Bobby Lashley vs. Goldberg, which ended when Goldberg's son got involved into the mix for some reason. Or how about Red Velvet and Cody going against Shaquille O'Neal and Jade Cargill? Oh, and of course, Blood and Guts can also count as the worst match as well as a potential most disappointing too. But now that we talked about all those, let's go over the official nominees. Unfortunately, I do have to name yet something else involving Alexa Bliss, as her match with Randy Orton was absolutely terrible. What can I say? This gimmick really wasn't doing her any favors. But speaking of bad Halloween gimmicks, let's not forget about Damian Priest vs. The Miz, which had yet another stupid movie tie-in. Oh, and there was also Becky Lynch vs. Bianca Belair, where Bianca was completely punked out in just a matter of seconds, ruining all the momentum she got from WrestleMania. Having to choose which of these matches is the worst, well, that's definitely a tough call. One that I don't have to make. And now there's just one more category left, the best match of the year. And thankfully, there were definitely a lot of great candidates to choose from. Like for instance, Roman Reigns vs. Daniel Bryan on an episode of SmackDown, as well as the awesome match between Josh Alexander and Christian Cage, as well as that WrestleMania match that I just talked about between Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair. But as great as all of those were, let's go over the 3 official nominees. Our first candidate for Match of the Year was one that was very popular amongst a lot of wrestling fans, and that's Daniel Bryan vs. Edge vs. Roman Reigns, the main event to WrestleMania. This match had a lot of great spots, and as far as many people were concerned, was a great way to cap off the WrestleMania experience now that fans had finally returned to attendance. But speaking of which, instead of focusing on the last match of WrestleMania, how about we take a look at the first, as Drew McIntyre vs. Bobby Lashley was the first match to finally see a full capacity crowd in over a year. The crowd's energy completely worked to make this match, as this hoss fight got the fans at the edge of their seats cheering and screaming for anything that these two would do. But of course, let's not forget about the epic dream match between Kenny Omega, the AEW champion, and Bryan Danielson. These two put on an absolute masterclass, a complete clinic. It's rare when we get to see a dream match really live up to the hype, and this match certainly did, even though it ended in a draw. And with that being said, please go ahead and vote for the match that you think is the absolute best of 2021. Well, there you go, the nominees for the Dave Knows Wrestling's 2021 awards. Please be sure to vote as soon as you possibly can, as these polls aren't going to be up for very long, and be sure to check out next week when we go over the winners. Anyway, thank you so much for being here, and as always, Dave Knows.